All right. Well, this week we continue our monthly topic, which is talking more in depth about intuition, psychic abilities, and intuitive development. So I'm, of course, here with Colleen. Hi, Colleen.
Hello.
And Danny.
Hi.
Hi, Danny. And we started the introduction to this topic last week. We're going to continue to cover it. And this week, we are going to go deeper into some of the differences in the terms, because that was something that we realized that we may not have defined the terms that we were talking about last month, kind of what they all mean. So if you're newer to Reiki, if you're newer to these topics, then it might be helpful to know what the heck we're talking about. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into our clair senses today. I know we talked about it last week as well. But we're also going to go into some of like the differences between intuition, psychic insight, imagination, and how that all plays a role in this topic, how that all plays a role in the things that we might already be experiencing. Some of you might have this very developed within you and in your practice. Some of you might be wondering, how can I develop that? Because that's another thing about our intuition, our psychic development. It is something that we can gain skill in. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it, Colleen, unless there's anything that you want to go ahead and talk about.
I would just add that although we talk about this a lot, I think one of the realizations we had with Reiki is that it activates this within us in a variety of ways. And mostly what we have discovered in teaching this topic through our Reiki classes, our next step classes, is how underdeveloped the ability actually is in us. And we keep talking about it, and we'll talk about it more, but also how you can use Reiki to develop these natural abilities that you already have. And in many people, they've been actually suppressed for a variety of reasons, and then also sometimes underdeveloped. And then many of you may have really already a lot of skill. As much as we teach this and we have skill in it, I would say that every time we talk about it, every time we teach it, every time it's the subject we're focusing on, I learn more. So it's an unending development that will only and always increase. One of the huge awarenesses, and will still keep coming out if you haven't listened to the podcast called the telepathy tapes, I think it's another big piece of recognizing how much telepathy, and we'll talk more about that in another month, not in at another time, but also recognizing that natural part of our intellect as well, so that Reiki enhances and empowers. So, anyway, that's all I have to add.
Yeah. So I'm just going to review the clair senses again. And you might have heard this term or hear this term in the spiritual channels and things like that. And these are just ways to define how we might perceive our intuition. And just a reminder that when we're talking about our intuition, we're talking about our daily walking intuition. We are talking about how we might sense things within like a Reiki session, whether it's for us or by us as practitioners. And it also might be when we are in like a meditation or a Reiki journey. It's how that is the kind of larger aspect to how we sense things or have an extra sensory perceptions with it. So they are the extra senses of our intuition. They're intuitive abilities beyond our five physical senses, allowing us to perceive information through vision, sounds, feelings, and knowingness. And so you might have one or more of the senses. So again, we have clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. I think most people attribute intuition or psychic abilities to clairvoyance. So this is where you're seeing pictures. This is where it's a very visual aspect. You might see colors, and a lot of times they're very visual people who have this clear sense. However, with this, there can be a very metaphorical aspect, and I would say that might even be true with all of the clair senses, but you see this a lot in clairvoyance, where you have to understand and have to develop what the pictures that you might be shown are, how they're metaphorical. There's clairaudience, which is clear hearing, and this again is either in a literal sense or figurative, hearing the words. So also if you and anybody can be connected to sound healing, but you do see a lot of this clairaudience in people who are very connected to sound. And maybe even knowing the frequencies of sounds, things like that, that can be a part of the clairaudience. There's claircognizance, which is clear knowing. So it's a sudden knowing, or can be a knowing in your mind's eye. Eureka moments are common for this type. Downloads are common for this type. Um, for me, I'm claircognizance and clair intellect. And I also get quite metaphorical idea. So I wanted to wait to talk about that until I mention these two. Clair intellect, clear thinking. So it comes in as thoughts, whether it's in meditation, conversation, or in an organized way. Um, they are from a higher source than mind chatter, and this is for you analytical folks. You could be a clair intellect. So that's another one. And clair cognizance and clair intellect can have this kind of um, aspect to each other where there's a lot of blending between the two. Now, again, this could come in the form of a metaphorical idea. So, as an example of this, and this happens for me, that's why I'm using this example, happens slightly different for Colleen, is that I will have like a knowing of a movie scene. And I know I've talked about this before, but movie scenes will come in to help me have the metaphorical aspect of what wants to be known by me or shared to another person. And so you do have to kind of understand that metaphorical aspect. So I don't actually see any pictures. I don't have any clairvoyance, so I don't see anything. I say shown to me a lot. I mean that very proverbially. Um, but I have to kind of listen around why that's metaphorical to either myself or to the session. Whereas Colleen might see a movie scene and it's the same thing. She has to have that metaphorical understanding around her intuition and what the information is trying to convey, again, to her or to somebody else. And that's kind of what I mean by the metaphorical. For me, I'll just think of a movie scene. So, or just like it'll just kind of pop into my knowing. Like I can visualize the movie scene or imagine the movie scene, but I'm not actually seeing anything from the movie scene. Maybe I'll have a remembering of it. So funny enough, Disney movies come into my awareness a lot. Um, but I will have those scenes that like just pop in and it's like, oh, okay, so this is what this is trying to say, but it's that metaphorical aspect. We have clear empathy, which is clear emotion. So this is where you're really sensing and feeling your intuition and a lot of emotions from others, or even for yourself. So with this one, though, I will say that I feel like a lot of people are empathetic, especially drawn to these um, ways. And yes, it can be a form of intuition for everybody. But when I'm talking about clair empathy, I'm talking about that this is kind of your main way. So maybe you're not getting that, knowing or visual or hearing, but you're feeling feelings around it. So let's say in a journey, even if it's for somebody else, you go to, we use this location a lot. You go to the river of life, and that river of life brings up feelings. Maybe it brings up joy, or maybe it brings up sadness. And so you are feeling the emotions, and through that feeling, that's how you are receiving your information. Now, this is one where there can be a development of skill around it. I would say this is one of those that, um unless you are, really settled in that idea that this is your intuition style, and have that working of it, of fully understanding it. Developing this one just from our experience as teachers is one of those that it's like, okay, if I feel that, what does that metaphorically mean? What does this mean to the person? What does this mean to myself? Is this mine? Is this theirs? So there is, I don't want to say it's like one of the harder, but for lack of a better term, I see people like, okay, that means that I don't have intuition just because I'm feeling it, or feeling it in my body. I don't have intuition. Um, but that's not true. Actually, it's a very developed and very strong sense. It's just a matter of really learning how it works for you. Whereas I feel like when you can just see something, it's like, oh, okay, now I just have to figure out how metaphorically that works. And, there's still a process of that and getting to know it and all of that. But it seems so much more straightforward than to me, clair empathy and clairsentience. Um, and for the empaths, like the people that you really have to work at observing and not absorbing, like there can be this aspect like where you have known that you're an empath your entire life. It's really strong, and sometimes even a bit of a hazard for you. Um, and you have to learn how to manage that, and pulling yourself back from other people's emotions, because that's so strong there. Now I know for example that I'm empathic. I know when I can, not always know, but I know that I can pick up on other people, especially family members. Um, but I'm not an empath in the way that I know some of you are empaths, where it is like you feel everything. The clairsentience is clear feeling. That's where you can feel things physically. So it is a little bit different than the clair empathy, although a lot of times these two have that intermingling as well. So um, this is in the way of like if somebody has a stomach ache, you can feel it in your stomach, whether that's hurting or just an sensation in your stomach. It doesn't always have to be the exact feeling that somebody else, or the exact sensation that somebody else is feeling. So it's not an emotion, it's an actual physical feeling with it. Clairtangency is clear touching. So this is where you are receiving information by touching a person or object. So in this case, you might actually even touch it in your mind's eye. So in this case, a good example to kind of understand this is when you see people who they touch a watch or something like that, and they can get information about, or something comes through about, maybe a person who owned the watch. And it doesn't always have to be mediumship or something like that, but it is definitely a clear sense that people experience. Then you have clairsalience and clairgustance. So clairsalience is clear smelling. That is where your intuition can manifest through smell. And again, that knowing, I know I talked a bit about these last week, that knowing of the smell, or actually smelling the smell. And this can be in your journey work, in your self Reiki work, or it can be in your physical life, your walking daily life. And then clairgustance is clear tasting. So with clear smelling, maybe you smell a perfume of your grandmother that offered you guidance. Claire Gustance, maybe you tasted your favorite recipe, or if you're doing a session for something else, all of a sudden this food came through that maybe the person's, grandmother cooked for them, as an example, and it's bringing up these things to indicate that maybe that the grandmother is, visiting or just sending love, or maybe there's healing around the grandmother that needs to take place, and those kinds of things. Somebody asked about my examples of my clairsalience, because it is an intuitive sense in the way that it's like a part of my instincts. Um, and I shared those examples on the last Q&A podcast, which was released this last Monday. So yesterday, September 8th. So you can go and check it out. So again, now these are things that are a part of our all of the different parts of how our intuition and how our psychic impressions and psychic insights and our imaginations might play a role within it. And one of the things that can be a part of this process is like, how do I know the difference between all of these? How can I know the difference of when it is sorry, my dog just needed to be let into my office. How do I know the difference when, like, if I am a clear intellect and it's coming through as thought, how can I know the difference of whether it is worry or whether it's real or whether it's actually intuition? And as somebody who has that, I can tell you that it is a part of the development. Or if you are a clair empath and you have to discern whether it's yours or whether it's something else or someone else. So, am I just picking up on their grief, or is this my own grief, or their worry, or is this my um, own worry or my psychic impression of what might happen? So that is a part of the discernment. It's a part of the development of all of it. It's a part of getting to know it for you, because what might be true for me might not be true for you in those ways. I will say how I can really know a difference is when I feel that calm feeling in my body. It's a grounded sense as opposed to a worried or that kind of heightened sense of uh, it's like my nervous system can feel very overactivated, or it can feel like an anxious feeling when when I am not when I'm like in my overthinking, when I'm in my worry, things like that. So, in your empathy, can you take a moment? Can you listen? Can you pull your energy back close into you and really listen? Is this me or is this them? Am I just picking up on them, or am I picking up, or am I actually having my own psychic impressions that are happening right now about the situation? And, like, I know for me, there's certain people that I have a hard time, like, wading through their feelings. And so if I try to ask myself the question of like, "Oh, okay, is this a psychic feeling that I have? Is this a psychic fear that I'm having, or an intuition that I'm having about the situation?" And there's like another person involved with it. I have to actually take a moment and I have to ask myself, okay, I don't know if I can wade through the other person's feelings with this and actually get a clear answer around it. And that's a normal reaction around it. But when I can do that, I can actually, release the other person's emotions, and um, I can go into the actual truth of the situation. I can go into the actual, the reality of the situation outside of anybody else's fear around it. So to me, it's like intuition is a clear, calm inner knowing, whether it is you're listening into a situation or it's arriving without an explanation. Intuition can be about ourselves, it can be about other people, it can even be kind of one of those um, aha moments or that inner truth that Psychic insight can feel like receiving information from outside yourself, like if there's like a maybe it feels like from a guide or a spiritual being or collective consciousness. I feel like intuition is a lot of times more for me in my aha moments. I feel like psychic information or psychic insight is maybe more of like things that are outside myself. And then we also have to talk about imagination because that is a part of this conversation. Um, and it's a part of the place where maybe as children, we might have had harm to our imagination that we have to go into and do the healing work with that. If you were sensitive as a child, maybe you did. I think everybody's born with these abilities. Everybody even might have them as children. And as Colleen said, they are maybe not only suppressed, but they might even be harmed as children, like, oh, you're just too sensitive. Oh, that's just your imagination. That is all of those kinds of things that we might have had as children and really even actively harmed. So, going into that process of releasing those layers, um, because that gets into our psyche as a part of why we might not share, why we might think we're making it up, um, why we might even have blocks around this. So I know for me, like because I'm a claircognizant, a clair intellect, imagination is a part of how like I journey. So when the journey might say, imagine that you're walking over the beautiful bridge of light. I am actually in my imagination with that. Because when it comes down to it, also, like really, we're not leaving here. Like even though I am leaving here, I am still in my body. I am still in this room. And however we want to just, like think about how that all works, whether it's in our pineal gland, whether we're traveling to the cosmos, um, however we want to think about this information and how it comes through for us it is very real, right? And for those of you that are, maybe even in the infancy of your journey of like, is this real? Am I making this up? That can be a part of the healing that has to come through. And so for me, even though I'm not seeing anything, I'm not visual, I am imagining that I'm walking over a bridge of light. For somebody else, that imagination might be that you are feeling how that bridge makes you feel as you go into the enlightened realms, whether you are going into like the divine realms where we very commonly say all there is love here. Maybe you're imagining what that divine realm looks like. Maybe you're seeing what that divine realm looks like, or maybe you're feeling what that divine realm feels like. All of these things to me is also can be a part of our imagination. So I know like that is how I'm claircognizant, I'm clair intellect, I'm thinking in my imagination about what it looks like. Um, so that is definitely a part of this conversation with it all. So, there also can be some things about like I'll say just honestly, like the parts where we can have a challenge developing this, whether it's developing our experience in our journey work or whether it's developing that trust with what comes through. So, our doubt on if our impressions are real or made up. And where Reiki helps with all of this is it helps heal those layers, right? That we talked about, those places where not just even on our maybe our childhood or life experience, but our culturally created experience. Because in other cultures, some of these practices are just inherent from the time you're born, right? And the ones that are, and I'm putting this in quotes for those of you that are listening, are sensitive. That's recognized and that's empowered when you're a child. That is noticed as something that is actually a part of your superpower. And in, and it's changing. But in this culture, that can be a part of like you're just being too sensitive around it. But if that's developed from the time that you were a child, what does that mean from the time that you are an adult? That you have this beautiful sense of empathy for yourself, for others. Like that is such a beautiful trait to have. So, where Reiki comes in is it helps to heal those places where that has been disempowered, and it helps you to empower the places where your strengths are. Like Colleen is a very visual person. She learns by visual. She is a very really great artist and, crafts and knitters. Like she can just do those things, it just comes naturally. I mean, obviously she develops those skills too, but she can just do those things. So she's visual in that way. Um, and that's a superpower for me. Yes, I am Clair intellect, but my analytical mind is also a superpower. So how can we empower those parts of ourselves? How can we use Reiki to quiet the mind so that our intuitive impressions can be felt clearly? So that, as I said earlier, like I can tell the difference when I'm in my overthinking, when I'm in my anxious, all of those kinds of things, because I can feel it in my body now and I can have that discernment now. And sometimes, it's not perfect. Like I was talking to Colleen about this Pisces full moon eclipse. And I realized on Saturday, I was so anxious last week, so anxious. And yes, I attribute it to certain things that were happening in my life that were real, but I don't usually feel like that. And then on Saturday, I realized like, oh, there is massive energy happening right now. I'm super affected by full moons and eclipses because of my astrological charts, especially in Pisces, all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, I am really also feeling the energy. And had I been maybe a little bit more aware last week, and I was, that like, oh, this is just physical anxiety, but it's also how I know that I am not in my full intuition with it all. Unless you're in a unless you're in a situation where like, safety is a part of it. That's a little bit different. Those instincts is a little bit different because there you really are also listening to those feelings, right? But that's a part of where I have to go into my discernment with my analytical mind, that aspect of me that can be prone to anxiety, the overthinking with everything and where I'm attributing it to. But when I'm in my intuition with my aha moments, with my thinking brain, with my shower thoughts that go into these beautiful realms of understanding within myself, understanding about my belief systems, downloads, whether that's work or myself, or maybe even a client or a class, my body does not feel like that. My body is calm, it's inspired, it is in a grounded feeling state. And that's where my discernment comes in with it. But that thinking mind is really also a beautiful thing because it has so much, um, that analytical aspect. I can do so much from that point of view. I can research a lot. There's a lot of that part of it that is also a really big, empowered piece of it. And we've been told that these two things don't match, right? We're either analytical or we're spiritual. We're told that those can't go together, but actually they meld together. And it's just about learning it for us. So that's where that confusion can come in, and it can really help. Reiki can really help us in our discernment, and it can quiet not just the mind, but also the body, that nervous system um, that might need to be quieted. So then also, what about personal thoughts from our psychic messages? We can use the Reiki symbols for things like this. So that's another place that can be, that's another tool that we can use. And again, when you're in that Clair intellect, that can be one of the places that we have to kind of like figure that out and discern from ourselves. But, for the most part now, I can understand when each is each, or even when I'm in a journey and I'm in mind chatter, is this mind chatter? Is this telling me something? Is this important? Or do I just need to let it go and know that I'm in that overthinking, am in that mind chatter, and just come back to the next one? That's okay. We also can have fear of sharing intuitive insights. And this is a really just natural part of this process. Um, because again, we're told kind of not to share with this stuff. Also, what if we get it wrong? And there's a space in here with this also when it comes to talking about validation, because we hear the word validation and we do know that none of this is for our own validation of things. But one of the things that Colleen and I teach very frequently is, especially in the beginning of you developing this within you, is or learning to manage it within you if it's already like overdeveloped, right? Is that validation is really helpful for you to build your trust and your confidence. So when we have a psychic impression that comes through, and let's say we're in a session for somebody else, we're giving a session for somebody else, and a psychic impression comes through, and however it comes through our clear sense, and we share it with the client, and the client 100% is like, either that makes sense or I got the same thing, and they validate that. That actually really helps you to, oh, that was right. I was hearing that correctly. I was understanding that correctly. I shared it. That builds your confidence in not only sharing, but also understanding your own intuition. The other place of validation, and I don't remember if I talked about this last week or not, but the other place of validation is when you might have a psychic impression, you just knew it, and then later it's confirmed that you knew it. Pay attention to that. Again, and now as I'm saying this, I think I remember talking about this last week. Pay attention to that because again, next time maybe you won't miss it. So there's all of these things that um, are a part of this process that Reiki is going to help us with this work. Reiki helps us to like not only just develop, but also heal the wounding and also empower ourselves, empower the places that our clear senses are coming through, that also can be a part of our natural personalities or our interests. Or, let's say you're a musician or so connected into music. Like it's a good probability that you are going to be also clairaudient in some way. That's a superpower, right? So let's heal the aspect that those two things, can be separate from each other and really go into this aspect of that connection to sound that you might have. Um, so we're going to continue to go more into this. So much of how we experience and get to know and understand um, our intuition or our imagination or our psychic insights is through the work ourselves and doing it ourselves. That is that is through the Reiki energy, through self Reiki, through journeys, how we're doing this, writing it down. By the way, let's say you had one of those experiences where you just knew it. Write down what happened for you in that moment of knowing that maybe you didn't listen to. Write down those times where you might have either wanted to share an impression that then gets validated by a client or by somebody you're giving Reiki to. Write that down because what that can do is start to help you also notice patterns within yourself. Also, again, we want to continue to emphasize that if you're not feeling anything either yet, or it's just not the way your Reiki practice is, know that it is one of those things that can develop gradually. Colleen often tells the story about being 2 years into her shamanic work and then finally realizing that this is what they were doing is this kind of thing. So it develops gradually. We see this in our next step classes all the time. And then just all of a sudden it clicks, because really it's not the part of that process so much is settling into it not being like somebody else's, it's us, it's what we are doing and what we need for ourselves. It's our own style, our own way. And that can be a part of this process of like, oh, I think it should be like this. Wait a second, let's release that and come back into how it should be for just us in this moment. So also know that. And then the other thing to know is that Reiki is not dependent on any of this. We talk about it because it happens for people, and we think it's an important part in Reiki, because people want to know and how to know what to do with this if it happens. It is um, enhanced our own practice, our shamanic work with our Reiki work combined, and those things are part of intuitive process. These ideas of like mediumship, which can start to happen for people. That's why we talk about this. That's why it's a part of our practice, a part of our teaching, because it's who we are and what we've seen with people and the type of clients and students that are attracted to us because they're somewhere in there, they're calling out for that. Um, but also know that Reiki is always doing the work. So anything that Reiki is doing is not dependent of our experience of it as practitioners. In my experience, it can help emphasize or maybe accelerate some of those things, but Reiki's still channeling through me. I'm not directing it or anything like that. I am just simply giving Reiki and observing the healing work and the empowerment work that is happening through Reiki energy. Um, and if that's not happening for you, still know that Reiki is still working and Reiki is doing this work.
Want to answer. I've been answering some of the questions. I've missed some of them. But one of the questions was about having multiple clair senses in day-to-day life can be overwhelming and even harmful. So this is one of the places that Reiki can really help you. And I would say, you know, working with that mental emotional symbol can really help you clarify, again, like Robyn was explaining, empathy, for instance, what belongs to something else, what belongs to me. Also, another thing that I do with that, because I'm also kind of walking awake with my intuitive abilities, is also placing that field of Reiki around you. So you can use any of the symbols to do that. And the way I think of it is, I'll put Reiki in front of me, behind me, on each side, above me, below me, within me. And also then the distance symbol to me activates our heart light, and it places our kind of our authentic own light within that field of light. So the field of light with Reiki, I think of more as a filter than a shield. So often we think of shielding from the external world when our empathy is really big, or our clear senses or psychic abilities, we're picking up on everything around us. The other thing to know is, well, let me go back to the filter, is that when you have that field around you and you think of it as a filter, it filters that external source of just the world coming in, and you can actually direct it to be specific to what you are willing to receive or willing to hear. Some of that for me has that takes care of everything. It's something that I'll have to think about and notice if I'm picking up too much of the world around me, or collective empathy or collective stress that's going on. Also, another one that came up the other day with this that I think is really important to always remember: our empathy can also be used to go into higher levels of frequencies, higher levels of thought. So a lot of times our empathy will take us into our intuitive abilities, into some of the lower density fields. We can also intentionally use Reiki. Reiki, remember, it entrains your consciousness to a higher level, and you can intentionally practice lifting into another higher frequency. And the specific tool that I use for that is that I have subjects that I have predetermined that I will think about if I'm in a place where I'm getting that, external information coming through, that I will notice it, again, part of my practicing, and actually invite Reiki to shift me into another topic that I've predetermined I like thinking about. Now, with that, I'm not 100% perfect at it. And also, the other thing I would tell you is you can do that on the fly. So, a lot of times we think, oh, I would need to stop and really take care of that in the moment, which, if you can, that's great. But let's say you're in a position that you can't do that, then you would go ahead and just rapidly do the Reiki on all around me, everything here within me, entrain and think about a different subject. So I hope that helps. It may not be exactly the question you were asking, but that is that how I manage that as well.
And then I just want to add really quickly, because somebody had mentioned it, is that dream messages and dreaming is definitely a part of this conversation, and intellect and intuition and imagination, healing and empowering. So it can certainly be kind of like a clear sense as a part of your intuition and developing it as well.